Welcome to HRO Today Radio. My name is Peter Cappelli. I'm a professor of management at the Wharton School. It's a podcast series we're doing on important issues around the topic of managing people and human resources generally. And as you probably know, there is really only one story these days around the topic of work, and that is the COVID-19 epidemic, the pandemic associated with the coronavirus, and how we responding to it in the workplace, what's happening to jobs, what's happening when people are going back to work, and what are the employers thinking. And with us to talk about this today is Kathy Patterson, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer of Ally Bank, which has been doing some really interesting things. Ally is a bank that has got just about 10,000 employees and has been faced with many of the same challenges that all employers are facing. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
So Kathy, let me just ask you, before we get into your response, just a little bit about the bank. You want to tell people what you guys do? An online bank that's been around 100 years is a really interesting story.
I was going to say, you wouldn't expect to hear that, right? But truly, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary last year, which was a pretty big landmark. But as you probably can imagine, we didn't start off as a digital bank. We started off as General Motors Acceptance Corp., which was the captive automotive financing arm of GM that was later spun off, and at that particular time was rebranded into Ally Financial. And so, at that time, we wanted to be a different type of bank. We wanted to be a bank that had transparency, a bank that did it right for their customers, and we went off to do just that and wanted to be a disruptor. And 10 years ago, we launched our digital bank, and really proud to say that as we sit here celebrating going on our 11th year, we're close to about $120 billion in total deposits. In addition to our deposits arm, we offer a series of other financial products, both for consumers and commercial. But probably the one that's most well known is our auto financing arm through our dealer financial services. So we're really well known in terms of providing commercial insurance, vehicle protection, as well as financing for our dealers. So yeah, we've been around for 100 years, but it's in the last 10 that I think we repositioned ourselves in the marketplace.
Yep. Sounds right. So let's talk about the pandemic, and in particular, maybe we could take you back to the beginning. So in the bank and with the leadership team there, when did you guys first start to get the sense that this was really going to be operating differently? What was really going to impact you guys?
I think the real bout of seriousness came when it was declared a pandemic. Up to that particular point, I think we managed with just monitoring what was going on within the field and what was going on within the news. But it wasn't really until it was declared a pandemic and we started to see actually probably our employees having a reaction and having concerns that it became more of a reality. That was early March.
So for you folks, it was a little different, I guess. Being a digital bank was a particularly good time to be digital as opposed to having lots of bricks and mortar, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, yes, it did help us from that standpoint that we didn't have a lot of employees that were in the field, but nevertheless, we still had close to 10,000 employees that were servicing our customers, and we had quite a few employees that were going into corporate centers. So the density of our buildings were a concern and an issue. And in particular, to give you a sense, in Detroit, Michigan, we had 2,000 employees at one location, Charlotte, another 2,000, Jacksonville, Louisville. So we had employees that were spread across the United States that still became a pretty significant challenge in terms of how we were going to get them to work from home.
Well, let's maybe start with that challenge, because in those different locations, the virus is spreading differently depending where you are, and the state rules and things are different in each of those locations. So did you think about corporate-wide, or did you try to go location by location?
So prior to it being declared a pandemic, we paid very close attention to what was occurring at a state level and did our best to adhere to the executive orders. But it was at the time that when it was declared a pandemic that it became an enterprise collective effort. And at that particular time, our primary goal was to get all our employees working from home. And prior to that, we probably had close to about 70%, maybe 60 to 70% of our workforce that was able to work from home. And what that meant is they had a laptop and they had work equipment at home that would allow them to be able to perform their duties. but we still had many call center employees that had desktops that had never worked from home, nor had we tested our technology from another location. So it was at that time that it was just a mad dash to get everyone working from home. And I'm really pleased to say that probably within 2 to 3 weeks, by the end of March, we had probably close to 99% of our workforce working from home.
Wow. So we want to talk about two things. One is the sort of logistics of making that happen, and then we can talk about the employee response in just a second. Maybe let's talk about logistics now. So in terms of getting everybody to be able to work from home, up to 99% is pretty amazing. What were the biggest problems in doing that? What were the biggest challenges in trying to get people able to work from home?
The biggest challenge really was technology, and it was moving from desktops to laptops. We have pictures, which is astounding to look. We had an assembly line towards the end there where employees actually were walking out of the building with their desktops. We weren't able to procure enough laptops to get employees to work from home. And there was such a concern from our leadership team and our employees regarding the health and safety that, we finally gave up on this sort of phased approach and just said, let them take their equipment home. And as of Monday, everyone will be working. And Monday was actually a test, probably the first test to really determine if our VPN could handle everybody on the network at once. So I think that was the biggest challenge, was just getting people enabled to work from their home and having the right technology. I think the second part from that was, you had leaders that were so used to managing their teams through face-to-face communication, walking up and down the hallways, popping into the various cubes to see and provide assistance. And so now everything was being done virtually. So that also required a change in leadership style in terms of how they supported their employees and gave work direction. So that took a little bit of time to figure out.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind. And that is, it's a question everybody is asking is, how do you manage employees now from a distance? So what did you folks learn about how to do this well and how to do it badly? I mean, what were the problems of managing employees remotely badly when you're doing this all at once?
Well, I think that the biggest challenge, was the fact that it wasn't just employees were working from home. They were balancing their personal and professional lives concurrently. They are now being thrown into homeschooling or caring for sick family members, concerned for how they're going to procure groceries. And so it was the stressor of all of that coming together that was probably the largest challenge for our employee group. And it was just the blurred lines between work and home and the ability to be able to keep up with the volume of activity that was going on in both worlds. And it was so unpredictable, right? I mean, if you think about it from us, at the time in which we're getting our employees to work from home, we're also thinking about how we can help our consumers. And so we put in a variety of sort of consumer support as it relates to deferral of payments, things of that nature, slowing down on our collections efforts to support our consumers during this time of hardship. And so our employees needed to learn not only their job working from home, but a new process and a new way to sort of engage. So the amount and the speed in which things were changing to respond also made it extremely overwhelming.
What did you tell the supervisors, and what did they have to do differently in order to manage this remote workforce?
You would think that would have been maybe one of the largest challenges. How do you get your middle level management to quickly adjust? Because as I could tell you, being in HR for over 20 years, that's always the biggest challenge. How do you get alignment across your leadership team, with that middle tier sometimes being the hardest? I think the benefit that happened here is that it was such a shared experience for everybody. I mean, everybody was sort of dealing with the same sort of challenges. So the empathy of our leaders couldn't have been greater, because they too were having kids pop into their office while on the phone. They too were getting information at the same time and needing to roll it out. So, I think that helped us a great deal as it relates to everyone having this shared experience, leaders recognizing their own personal challenges, and from from the HR function, we did everything we could to give tips, guidance, and support for how to use technology, how to check in with your employees, how to be more sympathetic, try to help employees with some of their personal challenges. So our role became more of a support during that window of time.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the things that you did for your employees? Because it's a pretty big list of things. Maybe you could walk us through your favorite or ones you think are most important.
I think first, we as the senior leadership team and throughout the organization, with a clear understanding that the health and safety of our employees is at the forefront. So every decision was made about that. And so it was easy to sort of get alignment within the organization. And so the things that I think we did really well on the onset is, we gave consideration to what are the biggest stressors that we think employees are experiencing. And at that particular time, it was all around benefits, their healthcare. What happens if I get sick? What will this mean? And so I'm really proud to say that many of the things that we rolled out early on were later rolled out within the CARE Act. We offered telemedicine. We moved employees that were diagnosed with COVID or had COVID symptoms, because at that time, not everyone testing wasn't available, moved them quickly to disability coverage so they didn't have to worry about compensation during that window of time. So we altered our benefit plans to ensure that employees had full coverage if they were contracted COVID. We also did a lot to make sure that we reinforced a lot of our plans, because during this time, employees don't always remember all the benefits that you offered. So we really focused hard on driving the message of how do you use the telemedicine? What can you do as it relates to working with our life support if in the event you're struggling with any type of anxiety and depression? So altered the benefits, ensured that our PTO schedule provided the appropriate level of support for employees during that window of time. So that's one. The second that I think we did really well was we have employee resource groups. And those employee resource groups served as a network of support because, while I think we talked about all employees sort of experiencing some level of challenge of working from home in terms of balancing their personal and professional life, certain select groups had even greater challenges, and our employee resource groups provided a lens to us in terms of what those challenges are. And I'll give you an example. Okay. Our Veterans ERG really highlighted the fact that many of the members of the Veterans ERG suffers from PTSD. And so during these moments, they're extremely anxious, they feel alone. And so, they created a call out. And so, a support networks to support those that had military backgrounds that might be struggling during this window of time. Employees that cared for children with some form of disability, they were beside themselves. I mean, they didn't have the support that they once did to ensure that their child was getting the right level of medical support or educational support. And so what were we doing to try to support those employees that are now not only doing homeschooling, but they're doing physical therapy with their kids? So I think that helped us create a real strong engagement line and allowed us to provide care for probably groups that we wouldn't have necessarily had a sensitivity to on the onset.
Is there something that you saw that you wish in retrospect you could have done differently?
I joke about this, what's the one thing that didn't work? And I'm going to say the one thing that didn't work was our pandemic playbook. Our playbook was built on theory. So what to do in the case of a pandemic? You had your call trees and how do you respond? But it wasn't practical. And so, if there's anything I would say that didn't work during this window of time, it was probably that playbook because it was built on so much theory and didn't have the practicality that it probably needed. And there's so much that was sort of evolved, if you think about it, around COVID. Every single day, you heard something a little bit different, different symptom, how you can catch it, what's the quarantine period. And so keeping up on that evolving sort of information, what's the right equipment that you need? What's the right communication that you need? That's one thing that I would say that we laugh and in hindsight, we probably could do a little bit better as it relates to some of the planning books.
Well, it raises an interesting question. There's some survey research showing that employees trusted their employers more than they trusted the government to tell them what was going on. Did you find that you were in that business of telling your employees, here are the facts, here's what's happening?
Yes, on a few fronts. First, our CEO, Jeff Brown, did a phenomenal job. He was communicating weekly to the troops. And while we were communicating from HR and our risk function about what we're learning, when we think we might return to the workplace, and in general, how we're trying to keep our employees healthy, JB did a phenomenal job coming out and keeping the troops grounded and calm.
Mhm.
And, at that time, you and I are talking about sort of the health and safety and getting back, but there is an enormous market disruption. I mean, when a lot of financial wealth was lost rather quickly. And so, you had not only all these other issues, but you had people also concerned about just their own sort of long-term financial plan. And in some cases, some employees sort of trying to make sure, because of the loss of income of a spouse, how they're going to pay the next. And so I think what we did fairly well is, just as you said, we did our best to keep people grounded. We did our best to try to simplify a lot of sort of confusing messages out there for our employee groups. And it came from what's going on in the economy to giving sort of confidence in terms of how our economy bounces back over a period of time, to how we're responding, and the mere fact of, here are the details as we know it from our trusted sources.
Yeah. So let's go to that now. So the next issue, of course, is to start bringing people back to work. How are you guys thinking about that? Have you laid out a sort of menu or a roadmap as to how you're going to do that?
Yes, we have. And I would say that the one thing that rings true for us is we will not be one of the first to re-enter. So I think we've said, hey, we're taking a wait and see. We are working efficiently. Our employees feel safe. And we do know that because of the way in which our office spaces are set up, they are fairly dense. And so even if we reduce the occupancy, which would be required in the way in which we've sort of mapped it out from waves, it would have a very sterile, different feel. People walking around with face masks, community spaces sort of being closed. So while we have a roadmap for what that would look like, we right now have a mindset, we're going to take a wait and see.
Okay.
As long as we continue to be productive. And I think our sensitivity is not just providing for the health and safety, but also recognizing that even when we say employees need to go back into the workplace, they still have to deal with childcare and elder care and other pieces. So our commitment to our team has been, one, we're not chasing a date. We're monitoring this very closely. Your health and safety is at the forefront. But then secondly, once we make a decision, and that decision will be made based upon more than likely state decision as opposed to one broad brush ally decision, we will give you at least 1 month's notice so you're able to make sort of the appropriate accommodations.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you imagine that you're going to come back at different points in different locations?
I anticipate that. While we have some employees that are in the field where they have minimal contact that are already going back, I do think that over time, our locations that have fewer employees, some of our smaller offices, will be more inclined to open up. But that all assumes what's going on within that state. And, as you and I are probably looking at the news, the number of cases are starting to wrap back up. So we probably thought we might get back in a little bit earlier in light of the number of cases that we're seeing today, and then anticipation of flu season right around the corner. We're just monitoring the situation.
So what do you think you are losing by not having people in the office? What would you say the problems are? Some people say, well, let's just stay out forever. What's the reason not to just keep them out forever?
I think the reason is the collaboration and the innovation that comes through the creative process. I think you're missing the small conversations that you have. Someone popping in your office and that has an idea. I mean, nowadays you got to Zoom somebody, you got to schedule it. You don't have the spontaneity of the conversations to build on. You can't pull people quickly into a meeting because they're scheduled. The ability to meet new people and broaden your thinking is less likely. I mean, your network has been reduced, and it's been reduced based upon the nature of the work that maybe you're doing. And, I think we've tried hard for new hires and interns to provide a network, but the network's just different. It's so much, you can't have that same social connection via Zoom. I mean, I think we're doing a good job and we're figuring it out. And, we've had happy hours via Zoom, but it's just different. It's just a different feel, and you lose that creative flair and sometimes maybe that connectivity.
Yeah, certainly sounds right. Let me ask you a last question on this. Let's suppose we have a vaccine tomorrow and that within a couple of months we can all go back to work. What do you think we will have learned, you folks in particular, will have learned from this experience? Anything you think will carry over?
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, I do. I think there's a lot that we've learned. Some of it is very operational, and some of it is definitely a little bit deeper in the way in which we work. So let me start with what I think we'll see a little bit different. And, I'll take it maybe more within the workplace. I think the concept of working from home and greater flexibility will become more prevalent. I think you'll see that more so, and there'll be greater sort of understanding of that balancing act between work and personal life. So greater flexibility, I think we will be in a position to maybe reevaluate roles a little bit better that can be performed from home on an ongoing basis. I think you'll see travel being reduced now that many of us have been forced to really learn the new technology that's out there. I also think we have a better appreciation of what work don't we have to do anymore.
Oh,
And a little bit more of an essentialist view of what truly is value added. And so there's a lot that I think, we just stopped doing because it wasn't practical or we didn't have the capacity. So those are some things. I think you're also going to see, because people are working from home and have demonstrated the capability, that the marketplace is going to open up even more for talent. So you're not going to be sort of tied to the same work location. Philosophically, or how you might think, I really do believe that in this situation that it has given myself and my leadership team, and I think others around us at Ally, safety and comfort in dealing with ambiguity. Yeah, this was a situation where the pace of change, the speed that you needed to respond, the amount of change, how unpredictable everything was, it gave a license that allowed people to sort of experiment. There was a lot that we were doing that we weren't sure if it would be and as much as I would love to say that we had this amazing blueprint, I mean, a large part of it was incremental. We were making it up each day as we were going and learning and listening. And so I think the learning here is probably the safety and the comfort for dealing with ambiguity. I also think a broader sense of humanity, or bringing in that human aspect of work. As much as I said what's missing, and I talked about the social piece for people and building those relationships, there has been a sense of humanity and a more human nature that you see, because we all have interruptions throughout the day. We all have the dog barking in the background, the kids. And so I think that has also sort of probably opened up to a greater level of acceptance, which will hopefully breed greater inclusion within the workplace.
yeah, that's one of the most optimistic takes I've ever heard about this experience. And I think this idea exactly right. If we could get through this, you could get through all kinds of things. And the fact that this gives you confidence that you can deal with challenges going forward and empowers you is a really interesting and thoughtful response. Well, there's a lot of information there, Kathy, a lot of terrific responses and insights as to how you folks dealt with these problems and the kinds of things other folks should try to do as well. So maybe this is a good point to wrap it up and thank Kathy Patterson for being with us, Chief Human Resource Officer at Ally.com, Ally Bank. And we look forward to talking to you folks again soon.